I might as well ask you. I already know the answer to this, but some of the audience may not. What are your religious views, if any?
Well, so I was raised, I guess, on the border between Judaism and atheism. But because I grew up in New York, you're around people of all different religions. Mm-hmm. Like some of your friends are Catholic and Protestant or Baptist or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, or, it's New York. So you get a hodgepodge of everything and everyone and their mother, and, people believe all sorts of things. So, my religious views basically come down to, look, when I look at what happens in the universe, I try to explain it without resorting to invoking anything supernatural. Because if you can explain it naturally, then why would you add on this extraneous structure just to fit your own prejudices? That doesn't make sense to me. So I don't really go there. But if you want to say, hey, look, here's what we have as the universe, and you're telling me there's a fundamental limit to how much we can ever know about it. Do you think it's likely, unlikely, possible, impossible for all of what exists to have come about naturally through some chaotic process? Or was it deliberate? Did it come about because, I don't know, some higher dimensional being was messing around on their computer, making a simulation, and poof, this universe popped out and it's us, and that's a lot of things are possible to me. I haven't found any explanation that's been compelling to me in the way where I've listened to it and said, oh, yeah, that's got to be right. I've heard a lot of ones that have pinged me in the opposite direction, but I'm very open-minded about it. So if you say, Ethan, do you believe in God? Well, if God means I think it's plausible that, yeah, the universe was created somehow as opposed to just came into existence, I think that's totally plausible. If you're saying, I think this specific religion in this book and everything it says is correct and infallible, probably not so on board with that. But as soon as anyone becomes prejudiced or bigoted or a Nazi, I am the Jewiest Jew you'll ever meet. Because if you're going to go after one of us, you're going to go after all of us, and that includes me.
With respect to, it sounded like you were offering an agnostic stance when it comes to the existence of gods, and you don't go to the supernatural, which is fair and something I would expect. With that in mind, I'm sure you've heard cosmological arguments proposed by William Lane Craig and various other people purporting that the universe had to have an intelligent designer, an intelligent creator. It's finely tuned. The Kalam cosmological argument is very popular. Anything that begins to exist had a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. You would probably agree that the universe in the cosmological sense had a cause. And I think you just did a pretty good job of explaining inflation and all of that. But beyond that, beyond the point to where we can't see what started everything or where everything came from, do you think this is even a cosmological argument? I mean, are we talking cosmology at this point?
So when I was an undergrad, I took a philosophy course, and my professor was a guy named Derek Darby. And he's an interesting philosopher who his real focus is African-American philosophy and relations in the United States. And, when we went through some of the things, he brought up some older cosmological arguments for the existence of God. And as they've come up throughout history, he did one by Aquinas. He did one by that came out in the 60s. He did. And I started realizing, first off, all of these arguments that were made, we can look at them from a physics point of view now and say, this isn't even a correct cosmology. You're making arguments for the existence of God because you are invested in the conclusion that, and therefore God exists.
My cat's very interested in this, by the way.
This is perfect catnip right here. So, but yeah, if you arrive in an argument and you're saying, I already know what my conclusion's going to be, and I'm going to make an argument to try and justify this conclusion.
You've gone the wrong direction.
I mean, I'll just say, look, I'm 43 years old, and my patience for that type of reasoning is decades gone. I have none for it. So if you're saying, well, I'm coming at this from the perspective of I have a conclusion and I'm going to make up arguments along the way to justify what it is, then I know where you're coming from. And I'm just going to say, look, you've committed to this conclusion, not to the logic behind it. So if you didn't logic yourself into this position, you're never going to logic yourself out of it. That's not how it works. So when you say, okay, look, here's the thing. Would you say that the universe has a first cause? Would you say that? And I'd say I can't say that for two reasons. One, I told you I can only go back to the final little tiny fraction of a second of inflation. Certainly, almost certainly, more inflation occurred before that. How much? I don't know, because we have no constraints. Did inflation go on forever? Maybe. You could say, well, we've got a theorem. We've got the Bordet-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, and that says that the universe in an inflationary state is past time-like incomplete. And I'm like, okay, well, do you know what that means? And you say no, because you're being honest. And I'll say, okay, well, all that means is if I take any 2 points in the universe and I say go back in time in an inflationary universe, they'll eventually get asymptotically close to each other. Right? You remember what an asymptote is from math? They approach.
No, I was just about to ask you.
They never meet, but they get arbitrarily close. So every point will do that in an inflating space-time. They'll get arbitrarily close together. Well, guess what? That doesn't actually tell you anything. It's possible that this inflationary state was eternal to the past. It's possible that some non-inflationary state existed before and had the right conditions to give rise to inflation. But I can't say for certain that the universe had an ultimate beginning, that time, you have a moment where time began to exist. I can't say before that, but maybe outside of that. But the second thing is, I already told you about quantum physics. I already told you that things happen, effects happen without a cause all the time. So if you are playing this logic game based on your intuition and not the logic that the universe actually obeys, what game are we playing here? You're trying to logic yourself into a position where you know you're using incorrect classical non-quantum logic. This is not how the universe works. Why would you make this argument?
I'm not sure that they do know that, in fairness. I'm not sure that they know that. I agree with your conclusion that the methodology is wrong, but I think people making the arguments haven't really thought it through to that extent. But
well, I think William Lane Craig knows, and I think he's being disingenuous.
Really?
I mean, maybe I'm giving him too much credit for thinking that he knows what he's doing, but surely, given all the people he's debated, this has been explained to him.
Yeah, he's never changed.
Chooses to ignore it
on this at all, despite all of the debunking. I mean, I've even not officially, not anywhere, but I can see right through his argument, and I've tried to debate his model many times with people. And it seems really easy to get given the evidence, just even at my level. But it's a
3-step argument, and the first 2 steps are unsubstantiated. I won't say they're wrong. I'll just say they're unsubstantiated. You can't say the universe exists, therefore it has a cause. No, that's not consistent. You also can't say anything that exists had a creator. Well, why? Why would you say that? Is the alternative so unpalatable to you that you can't even consider it? Because I can consider all sorts of things that aren't true. I just considered philosophical nothingness and told you, well, it's not physical. I can consider it. I can imagine it. And then What do we do with it? Well, nothing, because it's not physical, but at least we can
Mhm.
consider it. Can you not even consider that something could have been eternal, that something could have always existed?
They can. Unfortunately, it's God. And so that doesn't really get us anywhere because that's just question begging again. Theory is a word that has all sorts of usages, and people like to shoot down theories because that's just a theory. And, evolution's only a theory, and Big Bang, that's just a theory. Um, what is a hypothesis and what is a theory? Just let's get that let's get that out of the way for the audience, and then we can move on. How would you define scientific theory, and how does it differ from from a hypothesis?
Okay, so when we say scientific theory, I assume that we're talking about an accepted, validated, confirmed, and thoroughly tested scientific theory. I assume we're talking about a consensus theory like the ones you mentioned, like evolution, like the Big Bang, where the overwhelming majority of professionals working in the field accept this as their starting point that everyone agrees on for the next scientific steps we're going to take. A scientific theory is basically, it's two things. It's like the sum total of all the facts and all the evidence that we've accumulated in the context of, well, here are the laws that are established, here are the ideas that are established, here are how the puzzle pieces fit together, and here is this framework we have for making sense of the universe. We can make predictions, we can make postdictions, we have a range of validity that it works for, and outside or beyond that, it may or may not work to various approximations. But that's what a scientific theory is. And this is very different from the colloquial definition of theory, where you're talking about like, oh, like this is, I have a theory that the moon is made of cookies and cheese, and I could fly there in a rocket ship and eat it, and then there won't be any moon at night because I was hungry. And that's, first off, you can call that a theory, but that's not a scientific theory. A hypothesis is more like a theory that's incubating. It's a theory that has it's like that colloquial use of theory or idea that maybe hasn't been advanced to the point where we can say it's a scientific theory. But scientific theory, like when you say, is evolution a scientific theory? Yes. Is it our best scientific theory? Well, we've got a lot past Darwinian evolution. Like Darwinian evolution is still true over its range of validity, but Darwinian evolution occurs because of genetic information getting passed down from one generation to another. So the science of genetics has built upon evolution, and DNA has built upon genetics. And so we talk about like, okay, look, not only is evolution true and a correct, valid scientific theory, but science at this point is a good 150 years past it, where we've built upon it.
The previous question had to do with what is a scientific theory. I often hear about string theory. And I think I read an article recently. I think it may have been written by you.
I write things.
I read a couple of articles on string theory, and about both of them implied that this is something of a misnomer. So is string theory actually a scientific theory?
No. That's the quick answer. The quick answer is no. It does not meet the criteria of a scientific theory.
Why are we calling it that?
Well, there are other definitions of theory, including in mathematics. You can have a mathematical theory that obeys a certain set of rules and axioms and self-consistency relations, and string theory is a mathematical theory in that sense. But to be a physical theory, I told you, you have to say, okay, I'm going to reproduce all the successes of the existing theory. And what is string theory? Well, string theory is a 10-dimensional theory that gives you Brand-Sticky gravity and a whole bunch of unifications and supersymmetries that we don't see in nature. We only have 4 dimensions, not 10. We only see the tensor part of gravity, no evidence for the scalar part. We only see the standard model particles. We don't see any supersymmetric particles. We don't see any evidence for these extra dimensions. We don't see any evidence for super Yang-Mills field or
And that's
any
not
of
to say that
these.
none of this exists or that
It's
it
not to
couldn't be
say it
true.
doesn't exist, but it is to say if these things exist, we have to at least find one of them to say string theory does something successfully that the current theories don't. Because as it is, string theory just gives you a bunch of, stuff that doesn't appear to exist. And that's not interesting enough for me to work on. I don't worry about people who do think it's interesting to work on, because do what you're interested in. I'm not going to tell anyone else what to find interesting and what to work on, but I am going to say always, 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 when you're talking science, you've got to confront your predictions with reality. If you don't have any predictions that can be measured, you better get to developing your technology so you can measure them. Otherwise, you don't have a testable theory.
I lied because speak of the devil, he showed up. We were just talking about him earlier. So Leophilius, who's watching, wanted to ask whether you think time is a physical property of reality or an abstraction of the human mind. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but from the perspective of this question, is time actually a thing, or is it?
So I'm someone who believes that if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it fall, it goes and it still makes a sound, even if no one's there to hear it. That isn't to say that we live in an observer-independent reality. I think that quantum mechanics has shown us the observer may play a role at the very least. But I think time is real. I think time is real. It's physical. I think space is real. I think it's a physical part of reality. And I think we're moving through it. People worry about, is time a human construct? And I'll tell you, my animals appear to age just as much as I do. All the non-human things I interact with, the Earth had no problem aging 4.5 billion years before I was born. The universe had no problem aging 13.8 billion years before humans ever arose. And I don't think there's any compelling reason to think that time only came into existence with the existence of humans and will cease to exist when humans cease to exist.
My final question.
All right.
Have you ever met Neil deGrasse Tyson?
I have. Do I have to answer this? Neil deGrasse Tyson and I have crossed paths a couple of times. And
did you get into
the couple of times we have crossed paths, he has treated me as though he does not know who I am. And he may know who I am, or he may not know who I am. But that has been my personal experience with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Okay. Do you think that is on purpose, or could he just be could it be innocent, or is it or do you even care to speculate beyond that?
I feel charitable today, so I'm going to say, I look forward to the opportunity to meet him in a situation where he feels comfortable enough to say hello and be cordial to me. So if that situation arises, I look forward to the opportunity.